Welcome, my dear students. Welcome back to our virtual classroom. Today, we shall be taking up a topic which has got planetary ramifications, you can say, and which is the burning topic of the day. Burning in the real sense of the word, because the rising temperatures have thrown us sweating, and our very much future is at stake. So, uh, although it has been relegated into the background by the corona scare, but we can correlate this topic to our corona too, because uh, it has, you can say, hastened our contact with such animals that the spillover of the corona from the animal to the human being has been made possible. So, if we don't deal with this menace properly, we will have to be prepared for the future pandemics too. Uh, as far as its ramifications are concerned, you can say uh, it is interdisciplinary because it involves cosmology to climatology to physical sciences to chemical sciences and physiological sciences, of course. So, it is, you can say, an all encompassing topic, and taking into account its uh, stake for humanity, uh, we are not only discussing it in the classrooms of biology or geology, but the physics, chemistry, climatology, all are having an eye on our climate, on our atmosphere, on our cryosphere, on our lithosphere, that how we are affecting and how in turn we are going to get affected. So let us have a look at this topic and try to understand what are the changes and how do those changes are being triggered. So coming to the slideshow, the global warming, the spectre is looming large. The first slide says that we are uh, staring at the problem, we are facing the problem eye to eye, and if we don't change our lifestyle, if we don't get alerted to the way we are dealing with the problems, we will be doomed, you can say the list. So what has happened that uh, in the post-industrial revolution era, uh, early 19th century, you can mid 19th century, you can say from the mid 19th century to the present to the 21st century, we have seen a dramatic change in the rise of the greenhouse gases as well as the rise of the global temperature. So in the past 100 years, the ambient temperature, average temperature has gone up to 0.7 degrees Celsius in 100 years. And the rate of increase of the temperature has been hastened in such a way that if we don't stop this rise, we will be facing an uninhibited climate change and the extinction of the not only human beings but the entire living world will be the specter which is looming large upon us. So let us first see that what is global warming. Global warming is the rise in the temperature of surface air as well as the surface seawater. So it is average increase in the temperature of atmosphere, the surface and sea surface, and that temperature has been averaged through a period of 30 years, and only then this is regarded as a rise in the temperature or a dip in the temperature. So it should be through a period of time. It is not a period of a decade or 5 years or that. It should be a longer period of time so that we can draw conclusion whether the temperature is increasing or it is going down. So what we have seen that there has been an increase in the temperature in the last 100 years to the extent of 0.7 degree Celsius, and it has been about 0.2 degree per decade since the industrial revolution. So changes in the temperature had occurred previously too, but what is most significant way in which this change differs from the previous changes is that if previously the changes were gradual, they were not so steep. So it took thousands of years to go up by 4 or 5 degrees Celsius so that the ice age was thawed into the present times. But here we have changed the atmosphere so much by the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, particularly the troposphere, that the changes have become more and more steep, and so we have to be sensitized as a human race. We have to be sensitized that what we are doing, what we are playing fall with our nature, and so if we don't take ameliorative steps, we are to be doomed. So the temperature, as I have said, rise is more than 10 times faster than it happened naturally in course of the change from the Mesozoic to the Pleistocene or other when ice age changed into the normal conditions. Now this human-induced changes since the Industrial Revolution has led to the 1 degree rise in the 1 degree Celsius rise in the temperature, and that increase had been taking place at the rate of 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade. 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade, which as I have noted earlier is 10 times faster than the average rate. So this faster rate of increase is the main cause of concern. Now we are trying to halt this change. We are trying to formulate strategies at the United Nations level, and UN Framework Convention for Climate Change has taken place. Its meeting had taken place at Paris in 2015, and we have set certain goals, and one of the most important goal is that to halt the rise of temperature since the Industrial Revolution. That is, in the post-industrial revolution era, the rise of temperature should be capped within 2 degrees Celsius. That is, the rise of temperature from the pre-industrial revolution era to the post-industrial revolution era till now should not be allowed to go more than 2 degrees Celsius. Not only that, it has been resolved that it would be better, rather we should strive to cap it at 1.5 degrees Celsius. So the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change resolved to cap the global temperature rise or the global warming within the limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius as compared to that of pre-industrial revolution days. So to cap this temperature, we will have to take stringent measures to halt the emission of greenhouse gases from all sources, not only automobiles and electricity generation units, but also from the fields, from the animals, and from other sources. And India has set a goal that it will reduce the emission, cut the emission by 30 to 35% below 2005 level till 2030. So by 2030, India will cut the level of emission by 30 to 35%, and that would be a qualitative jump, you can say. And we Indians are trying to move ahead at pace with the world leaders, but it is unfortunate that the world leaders who have been exploiting their atmosphere from time being, exploiting the nature from time immemorial, they are hesitating, they are moving haltingly, and you can take the example of the United States, which has not been moving wholeheartedly towards the goals set by the United Nations Convention on Climate Change. So, while while assessing the extent of climate change, one more information I would like to share, the latest one, and I have euphemistically given it the heading that Earth's fever is running high. In fact, the temperature of Earth is running high, and capping it to the level of 1.5 degree Celsius rise is quite a difficult task. The latest one has been published in the Washington Times, Washington Post, and this report says that the level of carbon dioxide had exceeded far more than we were expecting, and on 6th of May, it has gone up to 418.12 ppm. 418.12 parts per million. So this is the highest level of the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and this is quite concerning. This is quite alarming. So it has been recorded on May 6, 2020, a few days earlier. So this rise in the emission, this rise in the level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is quite alarming, and it will trigger much more changes which will lead us towards the climate change, climate catastrophe, you can say. And what is most remarkable, that this month, the April month, was 424th month in a row which has seen temperature higher than the 20th century average. So you people who are, most of you are in your mid-20s or early 20s, and you in your lifetime has never seen an year which is having a temperature below than 19th century average. So since almost 35 years, the temperature has been going up and up and up than the 19th century average, and so that is quite alarming. The strategy that is being followed is called 20-20-20 targets. So we are going for 20% reduction and 20% increase. 20% reduction in emission and 20% increase in the share of renewable sources of the energy. Renewable sources of the energy, what are those sources? Say solar energy, wind energy, utilizing the energy of the waves of the ocean, OTEC it is called. So we should go for the use of, for tapping the resources of non-conventional energy. We should go for non-conventional energy sources, and we should increase the share in the market of energy generation by 20%. That is we should use more than what we were using previously, and that extent of using more should exceed 20% or at least be 20%. And not only that, we should also increase the efficiency of energy generation and utilization, because what is happening is that the poor efficiency is leading to the more effort in the generation of energy, and that energy is converted into far less work. So we should increase the efficiency of energy so that we can utilize, we can do more work in far more smaller scale of energy. IPCC is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, comprising of leaders of the field, including the scientists and policy planners, and almost 90 leaders have been involved from 40 countries, and the panel includes scientists as well as policy planners. So these scientists have at the meeting in 2019, so they have warned that the level of greenhouse gases has gone up in the atmosphere quite alarmingly. Quite alarmingly, you can say. It has not been at that level since at least past 8 lakhs years. So you can say that we have radically changed the atmosphere by spewing out the venom of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So the carbon dioxide, the main culprit, is up by the 40%, nitrous oxide by 20%, methane, though it has got more energy trapping capability than carbon dioxide, but it is destructed quickly into the atmosphere, and it has been added in lesser amount, has also grown up by 150%. So 40% carbon dioxide, 20% nitrous oxide, and 140% methane since the industrial evolution. And so the concentration of greenhouse gases has gone far and far up inside the atmosphere, and we will have to pay the price for it if we don't mend our ways. Global average surface temperature has gone by 0.6 to 0.9 degrees Celsius, and it has nearly doubled in the past 50 years. So the carbon emission should be reduced by at least 40% by 2030. So if we don't adhere to our targets, if we don't immediately convert our targets into realities, that is, we don't achieve our targets immediately, it would be very difficult for us to achieve that target of capping the rise of the temperature by 1.5 degrees Celsius since the industrial revolution. So we should be in the mission mode at the very beginning, at this point of time itself, at this moment itself. So limiting the warming to 1.5 degree implies net zero CO2 emission globally around 2050. So by the mid of this century, we will not have to add more CO2. How would it be possible? So would we stop the CO2 emission at all? No, that is not possible, and that is not feasible to. What is being required to do is that we will add as much of the CO2 which can be absorbed by the natural sinks of the CO2, that is forests, oceanic reservoirs, etc. They should neutralize what we are adding into the atmosphere, and that level should be achieved by the 2050 itself, so that by the end of the century we can achieve the long-term target of 1.5 degrees Celsius below the level that was in the industrial revolution time. Now we can see this schematic representation which shows impacts of global warming. So what are the impacts? Changing rain patterns. Rain patterns are changing. Somewhere recurrent droughts will occur, where somewhere incessant rains will cause flooding. So the pattern will be changed. The deserts will have rains, whereas the greeneries will have droughts. So it is not a uniform process, but I just gave an example. And so this change in the raining pattern will shift the zone of animals and plants distribution, and they will have to migrate to the more favorable areas where they can lead their life. So the stronger storms will occur, higher temperature will lead to the heat waves, more droughts and wildfires. Yes, what will happen that when the temperature will go up, the dryness in the atmosphere will be enhanced, and it will lead to raging wildfires, raging forest fires, as we have seen just now in Australia. The rising temperature will also lead to the thawing, the melting of the ice caps of the peaks, and this thawing of the ice caps will lead to the rise in the level of the rivers, and ultimately it will accumulate in the sea, and the sea level will further rise, and this rise in the sea level will lead to the inundation of a wide areas, low-lying countries such as Maldives, Bangladesh. They are being threatened due to the rise in the mean sea level, and if we don't halt this process at this point of time, in the near future, these countries will simply disappear from the map of the world. Now, while dealing with a previous slide, I have said that we have not seen such type of accumulation of the greenhouse gases since at least 8 lakhs years. So how can we say that what was happening in 8 lakhs years ago? We were not that advanced, and the information was not recorded. In fact, the evolution process was also at the beginning, and so how can we say that so much and something that how much was happening 8 lakhs years ago, or millions of years ago? So the question is peeking into the past. How can we look back into the past and make such generalized calculations? So here climatology comes into play, and the science of exploring the past climate has given rise to birth a new branch of the climatology called paleoclimatology. And this climatology, we can assess that what was happening in the past, or what was the composition of the earth many thousands or millions years ago, by analyzing the ice caps. And the ice cores, you can say, has air bubbles enclosed in them. You see, these are the air bubbles. They have been enclosed in the ice cap. And so when we analyze this ice cap and trap this air bubble, or carry out the chemical analysis trapped inside this air bubble, we can by different methods age this ice sheet or ice bubble, that how old it is, and then we can chemically analyze this air bubble trapped inside. It is literally the air of millions of years ago, if this ice sheet had been frozen millions of years ago. So this is an important device which gives us the idea that what was there millions of years ago. Then we have these pleothenes. These pleothenes, these are structures formed through edges in the caves. So these structures also give an idea that how the environment was at that time. So let us have a look at their formation. So this is the limestone. Say this is a cave. This is schematic representation. So this is the limestone cap rock, and water, it has been raining here, and water is seeping through the surface, and the minerals are deposited around the seeping water, and they are taking the form of stalactite and stalagmite. So here we have stalactites. These are the stalactites. These are hanging from the cave roof, and here they have taken the shape due to the seeping of the water through this roof, through the edges. So if we analyze this stalactite or pleothenes, what will result? We can age through different methods that how old these pleothenes are, and by their analyzing their composition, we can say that what was the composition of water at that time, and what was the chemical composition of soil also at that time. So here the limestone through which the water is seeping, and it is resulting into the formation of stalactite and stalagmites, and the stalagmites are at the bottom, stalactites are the hanging from the roof, and so they can give an idea about the atmosphere, about the chemical composition of the soil at that particular time through the geological ages. So it is through these paleoclimatological devices that we can peek into the past, we can look back into the past, and we can make amendments that how the past was, and we can draw conclusion about the composition of the water, the composition of atmospheric air, and the composition of soil in the past, and accordingly we can calibrate what changes we have undergone through the ages. Not only that, one more device or one more planning helps us in deducing the inferences through the edges, that we put these data in our computers, and we create a simulation, computer simulation, and it can simulate the age, it can simulate the conditions which were at that time of at that point of time, and it can also simulate the conditions which are at present time, because we have plenty of data regarding atmosphere, regarding lithosphere, regarding various interacting factors, and we can put those voluminous data inside the information, and we can draw a conclusion, we can draw a computer simulation. You can say, what is simulation? We can create a similar environment by putting those data inside the computer, and the computer software will create a condition similar to that time, and that simulation can help us a lot, that what was the condition prevailing at that time and what is prevailing is at this point of time, and how far we have gone in the wrong direction, and what corrective steps we will have to take. So climate change, that was global warming, the extent of global warming. So what is climate change? Climate change and global warming, these two terms have been used interchangeably, but global warming is representing only a small aspect of climate change, you can say, because global warming represents warming of the globe or rise in the average ambient temperature of surface atmosphere as well as sea surface due to the excessive accumulation of greenhouse gases inside the atmosphere, particularly the troposphere. So this rising in the temperature has got wider implications, but it in itself cannot change the climate. It will trigger certain changes which will have domino effect on certain other changes, and it will lead to the climate change. So for climate change to occur, several parameters, say several spheres have to interact, and they will have to undergo change like atmosphere, lithosphere, cryosphere. Cryosphere is the frozen water on the surface. The hydrosphere, biosphere, and all these spheres interact with each other, and their interaction will result into some change in the climate. And if that change has taken over a period of 30 years or so, only then we can come to the conclusion that the climate has been changing. So this climate change involves many parameters such as humidity, pressure, wind, cloud, patterns of precipitations, etc. So global warming is a contributing factor in a big way. So models predict that Earth will be warmer between 2 and 6 degrees Celsius in the next century. So you can see that if we don't amend our ways, if we don't take ameliorative steps, preventive steps, you can say, the Earth is going to warm not only at the 2 degrees Celsius, but between 2 to 6 degrees Celsius, and that will be a tipping point for climate change. That is, the climate will start changing in such a way that it would be difficult for halt that climate change even after capping the greenhouse gases or taking other ameliorative steps. So climate simulation models, which we talked about earlier, that say that greenhouse gases, somebody says that the greenhouse gases, if we don't take into account greenhouse gases, the climate change will be zero. No, the climate change, the models of simulation say that omitting observed increase in greenhouse gases are able to fit the observation of global temperature only up till 1950. So if we put a cap on the carbon dioxide emission into the atmosphere, or for general, you can say greenhouse gas emission into the atmosphere, the temperature will go down, or even if it will not go down, its increase will be capped. It will certainly not go down, but its rise will be capped. Its rise will be stopped, you can say. And up till 1950, it was not contributing in a big way in the rise in the temperature. But after 1950, as the computer simulation indicate, the emission of the greenhouse gases have begun playing a big role in the climate change process. Now, the climate change itself had been put into controversy because there are some skeptics, say for example, the American president, who says that no, there is a bogey behind the climate change and it is being blown out of proportion. The climate change is not taking place, or it is not happening to such an extent that we should get so alarmed. So we should also see that whether the climate change is naturogenic, that is, it is happening naturally, or it is anthropogenic, that is, it is being triggered by the activities of we human beings. So it had been the naturogenic proponents, that those who say that the climate change is a naturogenic process, they say that there was an ice age and the ice melted and we people have come into existence and our civilization has come into existence. So uh, there was no increase in the greenhouse gases. There was no emission by the automobiles at that time. So it is a natural process by which the climate changes, and it is not that we people are triggering the climate change. And these skeptics, climate change skeptics, that is, they are skeptical about the theory of the climate change. They look upon with the jaundiced eye at the theory of the climate change and say that no, this is not changing, and you are simply blowing the changes out of proportion because nature has changed before. Before, when there was no greenhouse gas emission by the anthropogenic activities. Of course, nature had changed before. And even the temperature can also change without the contribution of the human beings. But that change is a very subtle change, is very small in proportion, because it can change, say for example, through the solar cycle. There is 11-year solar cycle in which we face solar maxima and the solar minima. So energy generated during the solar maxima is far more higher, and so that the temperature can be raised at the time of solar maxima, and the temperature may go down to some extent during solar minima. But while the solar maxima is happening, the temperature of both stratosphere as well as the outermost layer should also go up. That is, the entire layers of atmosphere should be warm. But what is happening? That at present time, while the stratosphere is being warm, but the outermost layer is not being warm. So the proponents of the naturogenic changes in the climate, they say that naturogenic changes has already taken place. The ice age has given way to the present time, and before that, Mesozoic era has given way to the ice age. So in the Mesozoic era, you can see the dinosaurs were ruling the roost, but they disappeared. It had been said that they disappeared due to a cosmic collision. So that discussion is not under the parameter of our present day topic, but they disappeared. So they disappeared, and their climate gave way again to the icy climate, and these mammoths appear. So the disappearance of dinosaurs and appearance of mammoths, the woolly mammals, this shows that the climate change is happening by the natural process. I do concede, and those proponents of the climate change, they also concede that naturally the climate changes, and that climate change had been happening through the ages. But what is most, you can say, startling is that the climate change has happened far more rapidly. In the past climate changes, 4 to 5 degrees Celsius change has taken thousands of years, thousands and thousands of years to happen. But in this present era of the climate change, that is what we call anthropogenic climate change, that is the climate change aided by the human beings, the changes are taking place at far more rapid pace and about 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade. So this will lead to a runaway climate change if we don't stop the climate change, or if we don't cap the factors which are leading to the climate change. So here I have talked about the solar cycles and how much rise of temperature can happen due to solar cycles. Even volcanic eruptions can add greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, but their impact will not be that sharp, it not be that rapid, it not be visible so soon. So thousands of years to register 5 to 7 degrees Celsius rise, and we have achieved about 0.8 degree rise in just 140 years. So if we don't get alerted, if we don't mend our ways, we are going towards the runaway climate change. That is, if we don't act towards halting the factors which are leading to the climate change today, we will be doomed, and that we cannot halt the process of climate changes if we are found lacking at this point of time. There are impact multipliers. That is, the climate change, you can say, becomes autocatalytic also at some point of time. That is, at this point, the climate change is happening due to the addition of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. But that addition may initiate the change of the climate. But after that, those changes can themselves accelerate the climate change. That is, they can multiply their own impacts. The feedbacks, that is, the result of the initial climate changes will themselves trigger further climate change. That is, it would be a positive feedback. It would lead to the multiplication into the impacts of the climate change. Say, for example, the climate change is leading to the melting of the snow peaks. So, if the snow peaks are melting, what will happen? The white colored snow peaks, they were reflecting more and more heat into the outer atmosphere, into the space. But when they get molten, they get thawed, they will flow, the water will flow down the peaks, and the exposed peaks will be of darker color, and they will absorb more and more solar radiation, and so infrared heat will be generated, and that heat will be trapped by the greenhouse gases, and so troposphere greenhouse gases, and so that greenhouse gas addition will lead to the firmer release of more and more infrared heat waves will lead to the further warming of the atmosphere. What I mean to say is that the rise in the temperature led to the melting of the ice. The melting of the ice led to the exposure of the bare peaks, and so these bare peaks were no more reflecting. Ice-covered peaks were reflecting the solar radiation, but when they were bare, they were stripped of the ice. The naked peaks, they are darker, they are absorbing more and more solar radiation, and they are reflecting more and more heat. And since the atmosphere, particularly the troposphere, is laden by the greenhouse gases, it is reflecting more and more heat radiation back towards the earth and leading to the rise in the temperature of earth. So these are the climate feedbacks, and these feedbacks upon the initial global warming, they have got multiplier effects on the climate change. They are multiplying climate change. So we will have to take action for halting of the greenhouse gases at the very earliest, because even if we halt the greenhouse gas today, the situation will not change tomorrow. It will take so many years, because so much of the greenhouse gases have been pumped out into the atmosphere that their harmful effect will take so many years to get neutralized. What are the changes? What are the impacts that that the climate change will have? So the climate changes involve change in the temperature, change in the precipitation, rise in the sea level, and these will have multifaceted impacts. And my God, those impacts are adverse impacts. So we will have to deal with those by sweating ourselves, by uh, mm, taking so many drastic steps, by changing our lifestyle in such a way that uh, we should limit the emission of carbon dioxide, emission of other greenhouse gases, and we should cap the temperature rise to the 5%, 0.5%, 1.5% levels. Right. So these impacts are health impacts, agricultural impacts, forest impacts, water resource impacts, impacts on coastal areas, species and natural area impact. So these impacts are all encompassing. That is, they are touching. They are not only touching, they are adversely affecting all spheres of our life, be it our health, be it our forest, be it our biodiversity, be it our conservation of water, be it our weather pattern. So it is affecting it adverse ways, in devastatingly adverse ways, all the facets of our life. So let us have a look at the impact of global warming on the health sector. So global warming has changed the atmosphere. It has raised the temperature of the atmosphere, and the change in the temperature and the humidity of the atmosphere is favoring the survival of many vector insects. What are vectors? Vectors are the carriers of diseases from one person to the other person, insects carriers. So most of the insects are carriers of the dreaded diseases, say for example malaria, female anopheles. So these insects, their multiplication will be favored by the ambient atmosphere in the post-global warming era, and their multiplication will lead to the re-emergence of these diseases such as malaria, which we have somehow controlled or put within the controllable limit. Then the weather patterns will also change, the air patterns will also change, and it will lead to the change in the appearance of pollen grains or allergens, that is, agents causing allergies in the atmosphere, and these allergens will lead to the increase in the cases of asthma, that is respiratory problems. Now, the climate change also will have impact on our water resources. It will lead to the water logging in many areas, because some areas will face dreaded droughts, whereas some areas will face incessant rains due to the climate change. So those areas which will face rains, they will have water logging. You might have been knowing that many areas in the Rajasthan which were deserted, they were desert areas, they are facing water logging, and this water logging has led to the breeding of Anopheles mosquitoes in those areas, and the malaria has emerged in a big way, and it has emerged as a big killer disease. So this climate change will lead to the emergence of many diseases which have hitherto been controlled or been capped down. This schematic representation summarizes the impacts of the climate changes. So the climate change will lead to severe weather, air pollution, waterborne diseases, allergies, waterborne diseases, environmental refugees, mental health. One point which I failed to mention is that the climate change will also affect us psychologically. And this psychological effect of the climate change will lead to the increase in the incidence of suicide. So you might never have thought of linking the climate change to the psychological changes, but the psychological changes will also be triggered by the climate change, and those psychological changes may drive many of us to the suicides or lead to the emergence of suicidal tendencies in many of us. Similarly, heat stress and cardiovascular failures. Rise in the atmospheric temperature will lead to the heat stress, and those who are cardiovascularly compromised, that is, they are having some sort of diseases of heart, they will have to be more alert because they will face consequences of the climate change, adverse consequences. Similarly, the malnutrition problem, because many areas which are growing crops these days, they might be turned into deserts. So desertification of the greeneries is one of the most concerning, most alarming consequence of climate change, and this desertification will lead to the famine-like consequences, and it will result into the malnutrition, and malnutrition trigger diseases linked to the malnutrition will also affect a vast swath of population. Similarly, the migration will also result in contracting new diseases which were hitherto unknown to us. Now, at the beginning of the class, I said that the corona has pushed this global concern into the background. Corona scare or the COVID-19 has relegated the discussions on the climate change in the background. But it cannot be relegated. Rather, the climate change could be a telescope to look at the corona affair, look at the emergence of viruses like the coronavirus or COVID-19 disease. So this SARS-CoV-2, it has emerged due to the spillover of the virus from its natural reservoirs, which are, some say that it has, the spillover has taken place from the bat or the pangolins, or it might have taken place from bats to the pangolin and then to man. So how the climate change is facilitating such type of spillover of the diseases. By the climate change, we are triggering climate change by deforestation. Deforestation is an important factor which is triggering climate change, because the forests are an important sink of the carbon dioxide. So while we are going on unbridled deforestation on and we are inhabiting new areas. So in the new areas, we are encroaching upon the natural habitats of those animals, which are carriers, which are natural carriers of these viruses. So while we are coming into the contact with those animals, and you can underline that those animals are not at fault. It is not the fault of those animals that they are coming into the contact with we human beings. Instead, we human beings are at fault because we have invaded their natural habitat. And so, since we have invaded their natural habitat, we come into contact with those viruses, and those viruses through their natural reservoirs affect us. And since this association is quite a novel one, a new association, we don't have the vaccines, we don't have the natural resistance, we don't have the antibodies, and so they are playing the depredations and devastations that we are having at this point of time, and we are forced to remain within the four walls of our homes. We have been locked down literally, and we have been relegated to the virtual world to talk. It is due to the coronavirus, and the corona type of viruses are infecting man due to the climate changes. Climate change, deforestation is triggering climate change, and climate change is making many habitable areas inhabitable. So it has triggered migration of a big swath of population on a bigger scale. And this migrating population comes into contact with new species, and many of them are carriers of the viruses or other disease-causing pathogens. So these viruses, these contagions, that is the diseases which spread through the contact, they can affect, they are getting a better chance due to the climate change to affect we people. And so it is not that the corona has relegated the climate change into the background, but the corona has again underlined that we should conserve our climate, we should halt the changes that are taking place in the climate, otherwise we are destined to be doomed. So that is, we have come to the end of this lecture, and in this lecture we have seen that how climate change is affecting us, how it is coming into effect, and in what ways we are being affected. Particularly, we have seen only one aspect of the adverse impact of the climate change in detail, that is the health aspect, and the other slides were concerned with the extent of the climate change, the causative factors of the climate change, and at the global level, what we people are taking concerted steps to halt this climate change, to cap the global warming, to hinder, to prevent, or to halt the emission of the greenhouse gases, which are leading to the global warming, and the global warming is affecting many other parameters through which our climate as a whole is being affected. In the next class, we shall look at the many more ways in which the climate change will affect us. So, at the conclusion of today's lecture, I would like to say that the climate change is affecting us in a multifaceted way. They are affecting us through its multiple impacts on the different aspects of our life. How do we live? How do we keep ourselves healthy? And how do we carry out our daily duties? Not only that, conservation of the climate and the environment is necessary also for preventing this COVID-like spread of the contagions like COVID-19, and this, in that sense, we should get more alerted towards climate change by this COVID times or Corona times, scaring times of Corona, you can say. So that was till today. Till our next meeting, you should get prepared for the next lecture, and that will be concerned about the impacts of the climate change on other aspects, say for example on agriculture, on the forestry, on our water resources, and last but not the least, our oceans. Because it is the adverse impact of the global warming and the climate change on our oceans that is triggering the change of climate in a big way. So till then, thank you. Thank you very much.